So I'm talking about a subject here today that part of you is not going to want to hear. But I'm not talking to that part, so that part can just deal with it, you know? Seems like an oxymoron to say the courage to surrender, doesn't it? Because, you know, we have this notion that surrender is a weakness. It's giving up. Giving up. Oh, surrender. You know, that kind of energy of defeated or accepting defeat. That's not what we're here to talk about. Because spiritually, surrender is an act of courage. It's an act of great faith and can lead to the greatest of joy, the greatest of love. Because it's doing nothing less than allowing who you are to be made known as you in conscious awareness. But it requires us to defeat or to dissolve or to no longer listen to the voice that would claim that life has to be a certain way. There's a voice in you and I, it's we call it by many names, it's the ego voice that has a whole laundry list of conditions under which it would first say, must be met in order for me to be happy. And all of those are arguments against the bridge that would lay itself down, the peace that passes human understanding. Everything that you and I truly want, everything that is our deepest desire, has already been met spiritually. And so it's not about one more lesson that you and I have to learn. It's not about us having to read one more book about spiritual teachings or spiritual truth. It really is nothing more than us letting go and surrendering to the presence that is us. That is constantly, knocking at the door of the heart, saying, know me as I am. Know me as yourself, not as some distant abiding place or some entity or some reluctant creator that is capricious and sometimes blessing and sometimes cursing, and that somehow I have to find myself worthy to have this grace. No, it's here, it's now, it's you, it's me. It is the truth of being. We are human beings, and we're really good and practiced in the human part. And we have little understanding and knowing and expression of the beingness. And it is the beingness, it is a surrendering of the humanness that allows us to experience the beingness. Do we know this? We've all had experiences in our life where we were not self-absorbed, where we were not concerned with ourselves. And those could be flow moments of life where you were doing some activity, say maybe a sporting activity, where you just felt like you were just being used, you were just like the instrument of expression, and it was just flowing and it was graceful, and maybe it was dancing or singing, right? Where you just recognize that you are an instrument, but you are not this separate individual making this happen. You are just in the cooperative phase of expression. You are like the sailor who does not control the wind, but works with the prevailing winds in order to find its ship back home. And the ego says, no, I got to control these winds and I got to control this boat, and that's the worst kind of sailor. You don't want to be in the boat with them, do you? But maybe you are steering your boat that way in your life in some way too. And maybe there's room for you to recognize how some very courageous act of surrender would actually put you in the flow again. And then you would then become aligned with all of these spiritual qualities that are just waiting for you to be open to receive. Because when we're arguing against life, when we're pushing away, when we're denying or rejecting or resenting, all of those are acts of closing down to the awareness of God, awareness of love, awareness of peace. So this is a tricky conversation, and I hesitated to do it even though I had put the title out weeks, days in advance. I thought people may misunderstand what I'm saying because there is always that risk when you're talking about a subject like surrender that some people will think that now you're saying, I just don't do nothing anymore. I just sit back. I just let whatever happens and be okay with it. And I'm saying that, not. It's not that we don't act. It's where do we act from? It's where do I act from? Surely there's things that are going on in the world today that we know, even humanly, at the human level, are not good. So the prescription here is not to say, well, just let it be, just go with the flow, just let it be. No, it is about accepting what is happening in the world as an isness, a suchness, as the Buddhists say. It is the suchness of activity that is happening right now. And when we do that, then what we find is that we have this spaciousness that opens in us. Non-resistance in us opens spaciousness, and the spaciousness brings us in conscious contact with the divine. And so then from that spaciousness and love and peace and equanimity and all of these qualities of the Spirit then have their sway and their way through us, and now we say, how shall I act? So that might mean that instead of building more prisons where people are punished and judged, we might find ways to teach mindfulness in the prisons, or teach prayer, or teach positive thinking, or emotional intelligence. Because when we are connected with the Spirit, our actions are well and good for all. Whereas we're coming from the ego, it almost always needs that there is some separate self here that needs to win, that needs to prevail. And it's fear-based, yeah? It's protected, it's defended, it's against. We have this element in our world, yes? We see it. And we know that it's not going to get us where we want to go. It's not going to get us to the promised land of peace and abundance and plenty for all. We know this. And what is our part to play? It's surrender. You allow it to be. And allowing it to be can actually transform it. This is this great, wonderful, paradoxical wisdom, like Jesus saying, the humble will be exalted. The giving you receive. So this idea of surrender can actually yield transformation. Situations can change as a result of your inactivity, but surrendering to the reality of the situation and making yourself a non-anxious presence in the midst of it. Does this make sense to anybody? You know this. You have all experienced some form of non-resistance in your life where it has borne fruit for you. And I invite you to think about that. So this isn't just some highfalutin concept that the minister is talking about on Sunday that, well, that's not for me, that's for someone who just wrote a good talk, but who could live this? Know this for yourself. Know how in times in your life when you have yielded to the prevailing winds, that you have been more accessible by the Spirit. You have been more an instrument of the Spirit. You have been wiser. You have been more loving, you have been more peaceful, because you made yourself available to it by not pushing away what was in front of you, but allowing it to be keeps you in the place where you are available to be touched by God and to be directed by God and to be motivated with the best of motivations. Spiritual surrender is not about defeat. It's about acceptance. It's about joy, and it's about faith. If we believe that there is a presence and a power in our life, and of course that is foundational, then how are we going to cooperate with it? And I would say that this method is the most profound. When you boil spirituality down, it really comes down to this. It is to not be in the way of God, which is what resistance does, but to be the way of God. Are you in the way, or are you the way? And I know when I'm in the way of God. And I catch myself sometimes not before I've acted. This is a small little example. Denise and I are driving a couple of days ago, and we're going down Constance Avenue coming towards State Street. And as you know, there's I think it's Santa Barbara Street that comes in. And if you're not looking, you do not see the traffic. And even if you're looking, you don't see the traffic that's coming on Constance. And we're driving down Constance. This car pulled out in front of us. And as the car got in front of us, I slowed down. The car, went, and I hit my horn. And it wasn't an angry horn. It wasn't like a bang. It was just like, beep. It's one of those, I'm letting you know. And because we've been doing these practices for a while, which is there's no one and nothing against me, even this, that I had a recognition that my response, I could feel it in myself. The feeling was she shouldn't have done that, and anger, and she did something to me, and, the whole thing, just in an instant. And I recognized that I want to let that go right away. Because it's not a big deal. So, I'm not saying I'm that advanced. Just someone pulling out in front of me. So I did that. And as soon as I did that, this is the point I want to make. As soon as I let it go, what came to me next was, oh, and by the way, as soon as I hit the horn, I saw she put her hand up in the rearview mirror and looked and waved to me like, sorry, And then I could see this was an elderly person. And all came to me was, my gosh, this individual did not need me. On top of the what just happened to her was she pulled out in front of me, and it was a close call, but nothing like me slamming on the brakes. She doesn't need me honking at her, What she needs is compassion and understanding. Now, if I honk my horn to avoid an accident, that's one thing. But you honk a horn after the accident is not going to happen. This is what we're working towards, folks. You see what I'm saying? Acceptance, surrender, puts you in a place where you can recognize the greater truth, where you can see that person the way they really are. You can see what's behind the actions. Whereas if your ego takes the reins, then it's going to make that person wrong and know that they are responsible for your whatever you just happened to you. And there's not going to be any recognition, anything wider or broader or more capacious in terms of understanding what's behind another person. And this is what you and I are here to do, is to broaden our understanding, to be connected with the truth of everyone's being, including the person who does something to us that offends us. Eckhart Tolle talks about a situation where he had booked a large hall to do one of his talks, and people were lining up well in advance of the beginning of the talk, as people do, to get their seats. And 200 people were lined up outside of the building because there was no one to let them in. And so Eckhart arrived close to the time he was to speak, and he sees all these 200 people, and someone says, the person who was supposed to let us in, there's not here, and everyone's gone home for the day, and we can't get in. And so Eckhart says, what could we do? We could get angry, we could have that human reaction and fuss and fume. He said, or we could just surrender. I said, this is what's going on right now at the moment, and accept and yes, take action, call, see if you can make some calls and find someone with a key, but to accept the situation and completely embrace it and to be with it. And as a consequence of that, he said, I know, I will begin to greet these people. So he started at the beginning of the line and started greeting everybody that was there. And just by the time he got to the last person in this line, someone arrived with a key and let them in. So when we accept and surrender, things can happen that we can't predict. But we're putting ourselves in the league of the divine. We're putting ourselves in the league of the possible. Instead of saying, this is an impossible situation and I will not accept this situation. Do we know this one? Where we're fussing and fuming and resisting, we put ourselves in a posture of saying, it is what it is, It is what it is. The Buddhists call that suchness. It's such as it is, it is. And that is such a powerful posture because, again, you make yourself available to this greater truth of your being. It's also admitting that we're not in control. Hello. We don't like that one at all. We don't like that one at all. But think about yourself as a sailor. Now, a sailor, when they're adjusting the sails and everything, they have a modicum of control over that sailboat, right? They certainly do not have all the control. That's pretty much how it is for us. We have some choice in our life. We have some ability to exercise will over circumstances in our life. But it's really important, healthy, and helpful for the well-being of all that we know that we don't have control. Because the more that you know that you don't have control, the easier it is for you to do what? And do we understand that the value of surrender is not knowing what's best for everybody? Holy moly. Don't we think sometimes we know what's best for the world and that person across the street and the neighbor and the crow that's flying overhead during the meditation? Don't we just know what's best for them too? You'd be better off if you'd leave right now because I've got a gun, It's like, I was sitting there practicing surrender when the crow was doing his thing or whatever. I think that was a crow. And it's like, okay, this is what's happening right now. This is the meditation that we all came for today. Because that's how life is. Life isn't this constant little, merrily, gently down the stream thing, right? Where everything just goes your way and everything's coming up rose. That's a song, but it's not a life. It's not a life. With the happy endings and all those kind of things, we love those things. The ego loves that because they're like, Dad, that's the way the world should be. I should get what I want, when I want, the way I want. She should be the way I want her to be, when I want her to be, the way I want her to be. I should have as much money as I want. I should have all the jobs that I want. The world can just do what I want. People should get out of my way when I'm driving my car. No one should pull out in front of me. And all of those are argues against what? Reality. And good luck arguing against morality. Because I guess what? I mean, not morality, reality. Yeah. I got ahead of myself. Because it's like being morally superior over what is. That should not have happened. Now that's a really good, that's a good concept, but don't live your life from that place. Notice that it's something that bothers you. Surrender to that it is going on anyway, regardless of whether you like it or not. And find yourself in a place of surrender and openness, and then gather all the forces of the universe, which is what spirit is, to address it, right? This is what you call practical spirituality, folks. This isn't the lesson about how to, manipulate reality to your preferences. That's not my message. It's not the message I teach. The message that I teach is the message what I think are all the spiritual masters teach. They all teach surrender. They all teach acceptance. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane said, listen, you take this cup, I got a better plan. No, he didn't. And the message of the crucifixion, if it's anything, it's a message of acceptance and surrender that leads to greater life. It's giving up who you think you are for who you really are. It's giving up the limited you, the finite you, the one that has to have it your way. It's giving that one up, letting that one die. That's what dies on the cross. That's what dies in adversity if we surrender. And what emerges is the self that you are, the self that God created. And that's what comes with that is the fruits of peace and love and wholeness. And then when I live my life from that place, and when I look out on my life and I say, what shall I do now? I don't need to be against life. I don't need to be angry with the world. I can love the world. And I don't mean love everything in it and everyone in it in that sort of Pollyannish way. I mean bring love to it. What would love do here? What would peace do here? When they came to arrest Jesus, he said, put the sword away, because those who live by the sword, what? What we want to die is who we're not. We don't want to build up the sense of being a warrior against reality. That's what your ego, your false sense of self wants. And when you recognize it, when you're driving in your car, it's a simple matter of wanting to honk at someone, or whether it's changing your whole life, like Denise has shared so openly, how many years ago? 27 years ago, where she surrendered her addiction. She gave up the life that she thought she needed to have every day. And what she got back was life eternal, was peace. Surrender is not for the weak. It's for the strong and the visionary. It's for the people that have tasted the truth and want that more than anything else. It's Martin Luther King saying, I went to the mountaintop and I saw this. He said, I may not get there, but listen to what I'm doing here. Nonviolence, not pushing back, staying in love, staying in peace. And then you can change the world from that place. You can change consciousness. You can change attitudes. You can change consensus. I'm still working on it. But I get that this is the way. I get that this is it. This is what I want more than anything else. Even though some days you would not know that. Would I? Would you? Let's take a moment. Close our eyes. Something right now that's in your mind, in your heart, that you just would like to be something else. And I don't suggest you take on the 10 on the scale of 1 to 10. Take on a 3 or 4 just for the purposes here. Something that just bothers you, and there's a part of you that really feels like you can't really be okay while it is being what it's being, just being what it is. And call forth whatever your higher power is right now. I just want you to not try to do this on your own, if maybe that's what you've been doing. But the courage to surrender is, first of all, acknowledging that you are not alone in this, that you are all one, that you can't be separate from what created you, from life, from love, from wholeness. You can't. And so if that being the case, then what is its will in this situation? What would it want you to know and see? Allow some time now in the silence to ask that question. What does truth, what does love want you to know and see? If there's any resistance that you're feeling right now to this situation, see if you just can't give it away. Give it to God. Give it to truth. Give it to infinite life that can bear all things. Just unburden yourself. If you want to take it back later, that's up to you. But for now, what would it be like to just stop resisting? To accept that this is what it is without a story about whether it's good or bad or should be or shouldn't be. And just let it be. And then see if there's an opening that's taking place in you. See if there's more space in your heart. More possibility thinking. And allow that to carry you forward into whatever your next steps are. And agree that is the foundation for your motivations going forward and your planning and your responsibility. And so we thank you, God. We thank you, Spirit. We thank you, life, that you are so vast and you are so unlimited, and that these little ripples have not affected the truth of us in any way, shape, or form that matters. We are grateful for this vast love that cannot be diminished, this life that cannot be limited by anything, by sickness, by disease, by impoverishment, by anything that can happen in this world. We're grateful for this truth. We seek to live from this truth in all of the little forms that arise in the life. Thank you, God. Amen. Namaste.